Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here on this lovely evening. I hope it's as beautiful where you are as it is where I am. My name is Justin Jones. I'm the project manager with WSP. We are the consulting firm that has been contracted to undertake an active transportation and trails master plan for the township of Seguin. I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about the process that we've taken to show you some of the items that we're recommending for this project, and to tell you how we'd like to gather a little bit more input as we move towards the completion of this project. So I will advance the slide here, and I will just, this is going to be our agenda for this evening. So we'll get started with a welcome and introductions. So myself and the rest of my team from WSP will all introduce us, as well as the key staff from the township of Seguin. We'll do a project update. We'll talk to you about how we've developed the network, including some of the kind of problem areas that we identified through our fieldwork. We'll talk about programming recommendations to support a stronger culture of active transportation and trail use in Seguin Township. We'll talk about the proposed project phasing, so the timelines that you're going to be seeing, some of the changes that we're proposing if they are accepted. And then we'll tell you a little bit about the next steps as we move towards the completion of this project. Just a little bit of information in terms of how to use the platform here. I'm sure we've probably all been on Zoom calls during the last 18 months, but just in case you haven't, for this particular meeting, this is a Zoom webinar. So cameras and mics for participants are automatically turned off and muted. The chat function is enabled, so please do feel free to chat. When you chat it in, make sure you turn it to everyone. Oops, that should allow you to chat in to the host panelists and to have it be visible. And then there is also the Q&A function on your screen, and you can use the Q&A to ask questions. If you do have specific questions, I would ask that you pose them in the Q&A. It does make it a little bit easier for us to track the questions after the session, especially if we answer it in the chat box, or if we answer it live. It just makes tracking that a little bit easier. So please do use that Q&A. But also feel free to chat. You know, if you're only seeing the chat, you can chat them in, and we will add them to the Q&A. And if you'd like to speak, if you're like myself and you do prefer the old-fashioned method of talking, then you can use the reactions button and raise your hand, and one of our project team will unmute you, and you can ask your question in person. I would just note that this session is being recorded, so if you choose to ask a question live and in person, it will be recorded and posted on the project website. So just stay aware of that. I would ask that as we go through, we'll pause for questions at kind of specific points. Odds are that we'll be getting to some of the points that you would ask questions about through the slides as we go. So, you know, I would ask that you just wait until we kind of get to one of our title slides, which look like this. Once we get there, I'll pause for a moment and we'll take a second to check and see if there's any questions. I would ask that during this session, you know, be patient. As I was kind of mentioning before I started recording, sometimes our internet is not as smooth and connected as we'd like. You know, we are trying to manage this in a virtual way just to keep everyone safe and make everything easy. So, you know, just be patient with the process, be respectful. Obviously, any discriminatory, prejudicial, or hateful comments or questions just won't be tolerated, and we'll remove you from the meeting. I'm sure it's probably not going to be an issue. I haven't had it be an issue in any of the public events that I've run, especially in communities like Seguin. So, you know, I'm excited to hear from you today, and you know, we really want to hear from you. So, so please don't be shy. So I'm going to move on, and we'll start with introductions. So as I mentioned before, my name is Justin Jones. I'm the project manager for the WSP team. I'm joining you this evening from the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Hurons and the Wendat, the Petun, and the Anishinaabe people. Today it's known as Collingwood, Ontario. And I just wanted to take a moment and say that we're all deeply grateful for the generations of care that have been shown to the places that we call home. And we owe a duty of responsibility to the generations to come after. And I'm excited to be able to be a part of this project in Seguin Township. I have some fantastic colleagues on this call with me. So I will just go around that our art table, and then I'll pass it over to the township for them to introduce themselves as well. So on the call with me this evening are Abram Braithwaite. Abram, do you want to turn your mic on, say hello so your video pops up?
Sure, yeah, thanks a lot, Justin, and I appreciate the acknowledgement and the introduction. So as mentioned, my name is Abram Braithwaite. I'm a member here of WSP and on this project technical support. So kind of involved in various different things. So I'll be happy to kind of help answer any questions towards the Q&A and such. I'll also be taking notes too. So if there's anything in particular that you want flagged, you can make a note of that in your comments in the chat box, and I'll be sure to have that recorded. So
excellent, thank you, Abram. On the call as well is our network development lead, Sandy Yang. Sandy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy Yang. I am a transportation planner with WSP, and as just said, I am the network development lead. So,
is that my internet or yours, Sandy?
oh no, is it mine?
It's okay. We got you back. So Sandy's been our network development lead. She is a mapping wizard, and we're grateful to have her on this project. Speaking of wizardry, the next member of our project team that is on the call that I would like to introduce is Amanda Gebbert. She is the lead for our landscape architecture and trail design team. And Amanda, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. That's pretty much it. I'm a landscape architect. I manage our landscape architecture team in our Kitchener office, and I focus my practice on trail design and master planning. So excited to be a part of this, and excited about the nitty-gritty details that we'll get into.
Wonderful. So the rest of our team is rounded out by our project principal, who is Dave McLaughlin. He's our national lead for active transportation, and really one of the most experienced hands in terms of designing and implementing active transportation infrastructure in the entire country. We're really pleased to have him on this project. We also are supported by our additional colleagues, Erica Stone and Ellie DeSandely. Neither of them are able to be on the call today, but they have been vital components of this project. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our fantastic township staff who have been supporting us throughout this project. So I'll turn it over to Dominique O'Brien.
Hi there, everybody. Good evening. I'm Dominique O'Brien. I'm the Director of Community Services with Seguin Township. I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking some time out of your evening tonight to join us. It's been a great project so far, working with Justin and his team at WSP. So I'm looking forward to this evening, and there's some other township staff on the call, so maybe I'll pass it down to Tom McLeod.
Thank you, Dominique and Justin, and all the other team members with WSP. I'm operations coordinator in public works. This is actually a very interesting and very exciting initiative that council has put forward, and I'm looking forward to see the end result. Thank you. Who else do we have on here, Dominique? I haven't even looked.
I think that's it on the participant side, although I mean, you guys can look on the attendees and see if there's other participants. I do want to acknowledge, I mean, I see Councillor Daryl Moffat is on the line, and I believe is there another councillor there? Dominique, you know the councillors better than I do.
I believe I see.
Sorry, my dog is
Mayor
barking in the
McDermott.
background, but our Mayor Ann McDermott is on the line as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for joining, Mayor McDermott. And so I will actually invite, I will invite everyone in the chat. We've all introduced ourselves. I would invite you to do the same. Introduce yourself. Tell us what you're looking forward to in terms of this plan and in terms of this project. And tell us, what your impression is of the work that we're doing as we're going through. We do want to hear from you throughout this entire session. So I'm going to get started here, and we will just provide a quick update in terms of where the project is at. This was a project that was developed fairly quickly. We started this project in May of 2021. We undertook some research. We did some infrastructure bylaw and policy options that we're starting to put on the table. We're developing our financial strategy, and our goal is to draft and submit the final report in time for the end of the year. So we are targeting a November council meeting, and we're feeling like we are heading towards that ultimate goal, so that this plan can begin implementation immediately into 2022. So we'll be putting some capital budget recommendations forward as well. In terms of our engagement and consultation, we've been reaching out to different stakeholders throughout the township. We've hosted a visioning workshop with other stakeholders. We've delivered a public survey that had a really tremendous uptake. We hosted a stakeholder workshop again to refine our network, and now we're here talking to all of you at our virtual public information center or public open house, whatever you want to call it. So we are nearing the end of this project, and we're really excited about getting in front of council and showing them the work that we have done. So everything that we do in this plan, we are starting from a place where we want to align with our foundational vision. The foundational vision for the Active Transportation and Trails Master Plan for the Township of Seguin is that the township will develop safe, attractive active transportation and trails routes to improve the quality of life, accessibility, and sense of community for people of all ages and abilities in the township. So when we lay out that kind of big, broad vision, we want to break it down into a series of more measurable objectives. And so those objectives are to enhance safety, increase connectivity, improve accessibility, prioritize the environment, encourage community building, support health, and support economic development and tourism. So we crafted all of these, the vision and the objectives, from existing documents that were approved by Seguin Township Council. So, this is in line with the different plans and policies. So for example, the Parks and Trails Master Plan, the official plan, the road needs study. We made sure that we were pulling all of those existing policy documents together to create a vision for this Active Transportation and Trails Master Plan that takes those one step further in terms of how they are operationalized. So what we've done throughout this project is we started with the road needs study in the 2018 road needs study, which looked at traffic volumes, inventoried the road conditions, and identified some of the timing for road reconstruction and rehabilitation. So we took that and we put that into our geographic information systems database, a GIS database, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And that will help the township further on with their asset management as well, because now it's a living document that they have a geo-referenced opportunity to be able to see everything that's going on in that road needs study. We also looked at the Parks and Trails Master Plan, which was a great way for us to connect to what the different destinations are within the township as we looked to how we can build a stronger network of trails and active transportation infrastructure. So we went out and we started looking at the existing conditions. And obviously, I think when you're talking about existing conditions for the active transportation and trails in Seguin Township, the elephant in the room is definitely the Park Trail. It's a really wonderful trail system that connects the provincial parks, Killbear and Algonquin, with over 80 kilometers in Seguin Township alone. So, it's an incredible asset for the community. The fact that you have crossings safe, separated crossings over the Highway 400 is nothing short of outstanding. It really does make it an absolute gem of a trail network. And a lot of what we're trying to do with this plan is to provide a higher degree of connectivity, safety, and multimodal use. So for people walking, cycling, and using some of those motorized vehicles that we see on those trails operating in harmony. So we came out and we did a site visit. And by we, I mean my lovely wife and myself. We came out on the Canada Day. Well, it wasn't the long weekend. We came out on the day before Canada Day and Canada Day itself. It was a real tough assignment to travel around beautiful Seguin Township, trying to get to basically everywhere in the community and take pictures and walk on all the trails. It was 2 very challenging days at the office, let me tell you. But it was just a wonderful experience to see all of the existing assets that exist within Seguin Township. So, you know, whether it's the on-road conditions and some of the opportunities that exist there, the great trails that exist within the township, and some of the amenities that we saw, you know, whether it's the Humphrey Trails, the Rosso Marina, or the Rose Point Recreational Trail, all just you know, provide a really wonderful environment for people to walk, bike, you know, ATV, get outside and enjoy the beautiful natural environment that Seguin has to offer. So when we look at the existing conditions, we, you know, in addition to kind of looking at the qualitative stuff and looking at how beautiful it is, we also need to look at the quantitative stuff and break it down into the numbers. And so there's 3 kilometers of paved shoulders existing in Seguin Township. There's about 43 kilometers on the Park Trail, and the walking and hiking trail is 5.2 kilometers. So it's there's quite a bit of existing infrastructure within the township when you take that all together. And this is what the existing infrastructure looks like. So the paved shoulders that we're highlighting here on Osler Park Drive, and down, you know, where it becomes 141 and then down Lake Joseph Road, and the newly paved shoulders on the Highway 518. And you'll have to excuse me if I refer to it as the 581. It's because the 581 was the secondary highway in Alberta that I grew up on, and so it's still very much stuck in my mind. But on the 518, those newly paved shoulders that were just recently implemented this summer. So and then of course the Park to Park Trail and then the Humphrey Nature Trails, those kind of form the majority of the existing conditions. Looking in at some of the settlement areas, just taking a look at where the existing facilities are, you know, obviously seeing in Humphrey the nature trails and the way that those connect within the community, looking at in Foley and how Osler Park Drive and the you know, the Park to Park Trail do form some of the foundational elements of that network, looking in Orville and you know, the way that the Park to Park Trail connects there in that community. And then in Rosso, where unfortunately there's not really anything for existing conditions, but we certainly hope to see that change in the not too distant future. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly because I suspect that these are probably things that you already know if you know, live, work, and play within Seguin Township. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we want to build on, and some of the things that we want to address as we move forward with this plan. So some of the things that we identified in terms of strengths, I mean, again, this is not going to come as a surprise to anyone. The Park to Park Trail, the fact that the township is working more closely with the Park to Park Trail Committee to do some improvements and really start to bring sections of that trail up to a usable standard again. Relatively high amounts of existing trail use and good partnerships with the nearby stakeholders. So, you know, whether it's the OPP, the Town of Parry Sound, the Georgian Bay Biosphere Reserve, et cetera. And then the connectivity between the communities within Seguin is mostly achievable, which for you know, for a relatively large spread out rural municipality is not always the case. Some of the weaknesses, you know, the trail conditions and the way that they're varying and they're starting to deteriorate. the lack of programming and discussion around the opportunities that exist within Seguin to get out and use the trail, the lack of promotion and discussing the beauty of the park trail system and the Seguin Trail and the Rose Point Recreational Trail. Looking at the trail user mode conflicts. So, you know, sometimes the ways that ATVs and active modes are using the trail does conflict. And so we want to try and create infrastructure that's going to encourage you know, safer and more productive use between both. And then a little bit of a lack of coordination in terms of the stakeholders with the jurisdiction over the trails. We get on to the opportunities. You know, our entire approach is to make sure that when we're looking at those weaknesses, we're always trying to turn those into opportunities. The biggest opportunity is to enhance the condition of those existing trails to support more active travel modes, really turn those into kind of an attraction and a gem that's going to bring more active users into the township and really start to generate interest and use on those trails. Improving wayfinding and connectivity, you know, really just trying to get people to understand how to get to different areas and where the destinations and the amenities are. Expand staffing resources. Sorry, there's a typo there, not staffing, to coordinate and manage active transportation initiatives. So really, you know, probably looking in partnership with some of your neighboring communities. So for example, the town of Perry Sound, and thinking about how you can deliver programs that meet the needs of both communities. And we'll get to that as we get into the programming section. You know, more management of the trails, and then finally looking at how you can host some different events. One of the things that I think is really exciting is that there was just an announcement made that the Near North District School Board is going to be making an announcement on October 27th. There's going to be an event at the Humphrey School, and we'll have more information about that. But there's some really cool programming coming down the line that's going to connect a lot of the local kids with the ability to learn how to bike a little bit more. So you know, it is coming in the township, and that again is done in partnership with other communities. In terms of threats, you know, we really just wanted to highlight these as ways that we want to, as things that we can mitigate as we go through this project. So, you know, dedicating additional funding to active transportation, trying to address the car culture and car dependency in the community. I mean, obviously, there's a big spread out geographic location. That's a little bit difficult, but, you know, we do want to try and create a culture of trail use and active transportation within the township. Unify those competing trail visions, start to develop more of a multi-use approach to each of the trails, and then ensure that the new facilities constructed have a minimal impact on the natural environment. So why don't we take a beat here? I'm seeing that there's some chat stuff. So why don't we take a beat? Oh, I see that Dave is here. Dave, I'm going to promote you up to panelist or to a panelist. Do we want to? Oh, he is already a panelist. Good. Okay. Do we want to take a minute on the on any of the chat and dig in on this? So I see Humphrey Village. Don't see that. I don't think there's any. Oh yes, I do like the Seguin Trail, but when I last biked it, the pond covered the trail and the fish had to swim out of my way. And no, you are not kidding. I saw that one too. Yeah, there was some pretty wicked water. I understand the beavers have been a bit of a challenge for the trail, and so we will actually be getting to that when with our trails wizard Amanda here. But if there's any other questions, you know, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll take a beat when we get to the next section. So when it comes to the public engagement survey, we were really pleased with the number of respondents with 213 responses. That is a really strong response rate for a community the size of Seguin. 58% of people who responded are permanent residents, about 35% were secondary residents. We had a majority of women that filled out the survey compared to 40% of men. And we did see that when we asked people how they are usually getting around, we found that about 85% are driving alone, which isn't surprising. But we did see that a lot of folks were identifying that they do walk and bike regularly as well. So we asked them, how do you regularly get around? We didn't limit the number of responses. So that shows us how many people are walking or cycling for their day-to-day use just to get around in the township, which is always a really positive thing to see. When it comes to safety, a lot of people felt safe walking within the township, but a very significant minority felt safe cycling. So we did see that split was fairly stark in our responses. When it comes to how often people are getting around actively, most people are walking daily or near daily, and about 20%-ish are biking daily or near daily, with about 30% cycling weekly or more. So it's a very active community, all things considered. The barriers that we're looking to address, speed, noise of motor vehicles, conditions of sidewalks and trails, obviously distances, and lack of facilities, lack of paved shoulders for people cycling, and the lack of on-street facilities in settlement areas. And the reasons why people are using active transportation in the township, those were pretty much the same. Accessing nature, exercising, spending time with family were the top three for both walking and cycling. Walking dogs came out in the walking, and having fun came out in the cycling. And I mean, I have a dog, and I can tell you that walking a dog is also very fun. So it fits. So when we asked folks what their investment priorities were, I just wanted to mention that the paved shoulders on rural roads and enhancing and expanding the trails, including improving the surface, those came out as the #1 and #2 priority by a yard. It wasn't even close. So it was really, there was a clear focus on a desire to enhance connectivity and safety, particularly for people cycling throughout the township. And then ensuring that existing trails are safe and increasing the areas of paved shoulders or sidewalks in residential zones. So, looking at how we can create a more connected, cohesive active transportation network within the community. The key destinations for improvement, the ones that came out to the top, were Rankin Lake Road was really high on the list, as was Rose Point Road, Tally-Ho Swords, and then the trails, and seeing those enhanced, as we're seeing in the chat here in terms of the conditions that were experienced along those corridors. So I'm gonna take a pause here and just set it out there for a second. If anyone has any questions or comments. Is there a demographic breakdown by age? That is a good question. There is. We just did not include it. Abram, do you want to dig that out? Can you dig that out while we go?
See if there's a breakdown by age within
the
results.
I think there is somewhere in there.
Yeah, no, I can take a look and I'll report back.
Okay, thank you. So we'll dig. We'll find out. That's what we do. And if Abram can't find it out, once I'm done my presentation and I'm no longer sharing my screen, I can log in on the back end of the survey, and I can just export that and show it right on my screen. If there's any other questions, let us know. For now, I'm going to continue on with our network development process, and then I will turn it over to my colleague Amanda, who's going to talk us through some of the potential problem areas. So when we were looking to develop the network for Seguin Township, we wanted to follow the traditional kind of 9-step process that relies on a combination of technical work and community engagement. So, we wanted to identify existing conditions and routes that have been proposed in past planning documents. So for Seguin Township, that really mostly meant the Ontario Provincial Cycling Network, which is a project that we led as a team back in 2017, 18, Dave? Anyways, it's relatively recent. and there were some elements of the network within Seguin Township. We wanted to identify priority gaps, identify the set of criteria to assess those routes, develop a candidate route network. So that's kind of where we throw everything at the wall and then we start to decide what sticks. We then get out and do field work to validate those routes and decide which ones are going to be technically feasible. We verify the candidate routes with township staff and key stakeholders. So we get a better understanding of what routes are possible to move forward, what routes are just going to be way too challenging. And then we confirm the preferred network, including the proposed facility type. And then our next steps are to do a phasing plan, so to identify when these projects are going to happen, and to then verify that phasing plan. So that's really where we're at right now. So the existing conditions, I just want to highlight these really quickly. We talked about the different facilities that are available. The paved shoulders, again, mostly on Osler Park Drive and on Highway 518. Kind of wide paved shoulders outside of the standard driving lane. Our main trails, so again, the Seguin Trail, the Rose Point Trail, and the Park Trail, mostly wide, mostly gravel, mostly kind of natural surface, all with a really great like sub-ground infrastructure because of the old rail bed, so they're quite solid. Secondary trails, these would be like the narrower trails. So this would be the Humphrey walking and hiking trails, where they're really mostly there for hiking and walking. Some of the key destinations within the township that we identified, and we wanted to make sure that as we're crafting our network, that we're considering all of these destinations, so that we're not just kind of putting random lines on the map that don't connect anything. So looking at the population centers, recreational destinations, beaches, popular destinations like the resorts, et cetera. We wanted to make sure that we were considering these because these are the places people start and end, when they come into Seguin Township. So that was kind of why we wanted to look at those. So our route selection criteria, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. These slides are going to be posted on the project website. And so if you're interested in learning more about all of these criteria, you can find them there. But we're looking at safety, so making sure that we're enhancing the perception and the actual safety on the facilities, connecting communities, developing routes that are feasible, again, that are actually implementable and aren't going to kind of break the bank. Providing access to nature, making sure that, because when you come to Seguin, it's not just about the destination, it's about the quality of the journey, and really like trying to, connect folks to the lakes, the forests, the rivers along those trails and routes. Servicing demand, really connecting folks, to where they want to go. And then connecting to the Park Trail system. So looking at that as the spine of this network and really trying to build ribs around it. So we did all of our on-road design according to the new Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18. So OTM Book 18 is the cycling facilities design guide for the province of Ontario. It was just recently updated by our team in concert with the province and a number of different stakeholders. And so what we did is we applied the methodology from that document to each and every candidate route that we were looking at. So we plotted traffic volumes and speeds. So we used the road needs study to assess that. And then we went and we decided what the appropriate level of separation was. So I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we definitely tried to align the proposed upgrades with planned roadway construction, because it's always a lot easier and a lot cheaper to deliver roadway upgrades when you're doing it in concert with, say, a resurfacing project on a local road, rather than going in and trying to do it as a standalone project. It makes a lot more sense to bundle that capital project together. So when it comes to, when we're talking, when you'll notice I mentioned level of separation. When we're talking level of separation, what we're talking about here is if we're talking about shared operating space, so the kind of share the road conditions, so that would be like signed routes, sometimes sharrows, sometimes like in urban environments, it would be just shared neighborhood streets. When you're looking at higher volumes and higher speeds, you get to a higher level of separation. So typically looking at a paved shoulder, and then if we were looking at places with really high volumes and high speeds, we'd be looking at like a buffered paved shoulder or a separated multi-use trail. Within the township of Seguin, almost every single road falls within this kind of interstitial band of between shared operating space and paved shoulder. And so when we were in doubt, we went to a higher level of separation and recommended a paved shoulder. And so you'll notice that there are quite a few paved shoulder, well, not quite a few, there's paved shoulders recommended through this plan to really create a stronger set of safe infrastructure that connects to one another. We didn't look too frequently at the urban context because there's not a whole lot of urban areas within the township of Seguin, but where we are looking at those facilities. So for example, on Rankin Lake Road, we did use the urban context. And so we're looking at either shared operating space with reduced speed limits or designated operating space like a bike lane on that corridor. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So we went through, we did two different types of investigations. So one is the desktop investigation and one is the field investigation. Desktop investigation involves us basically looking at maps using measurement tools and identifying where some of the different areas that we want to look at are. And then the field investigations was when I was out, taking a look at all the different roads. So we were looking for road width, the function of the street, how it feels, how it operates, surrounding land uses, topography, property boundaries, all of the the informal active transportation facilities. So if you're seeing desire lines and kind of like goat paths that people have stomped down, that's an indication that you may want to consider that for a route. So when we got out there, we saw a lot of different stuff. So for example, Rankin Lake Road, we saw that the natural vegetation and the winding road alignment kind of create poor sight lines, which makes it a really challenging road to walk or bike on. Lack of existing paved shoulders makes a available road platform, like we could do it, but it really would be tight. And then the posted speed limit there is already 40, so it does help to make it think a shared facility. For Osler Park Road, we're seeing the wide paved shoulders, the multiple existing travel lanes. There's a lot of excess asphalt on Osler Park Road. It's currently posted at 70 to 80 kilometers an hour. And so it would likely require some line repainting, and that's actually what we're proposing for Osler Park is doing some repainting and repurposing, in particular the paved shoulders where they turn into turning lanes to be a dedicated active transportation facility there, rather than having those turning lanes kind of show up. So I do see a question that came in, and we'll get to that in a moment, Ron. So we will get to it, I promise. So I wanted to just highlight a couple of different things. So when we're talking about the final network and what we're looking at, we are looking at basically a total network of 192 kilometers for the township of Seguin. So there's quite a bit that's going to be going down. So we are looking at enhancing the park-to-park trail, 26 kilometers of the park-to-park trail, bringing it up to a true multi-use standard. We're going to show you what that would look like in a moment here. Upgrading paved shoulders to buffered paved shoulders. So that would be on Osler Park Drive and Lake Joseph Road, to bring those paved shoulders up to a higher standard that's going to provide a safer environment for people walking and cycling. And that could be done with road resurfacing or reconstruction. And then repainting existing paved shoulders. So this would be on the section between Osler Park Drive and Lake Joseph Road, where it becomes it is part of Highway 141. They still have that same wide paved shoulder, but it would be provincial jurisdiction for them to do that repainting. In terms of the new infrastructure we're proposing, we would be proposing traffic calming measures, feeding the way to an ultimate facility of bike lanes on Rankin Lake Road. We'd be looking at paved shoulders in a number of different areas, signed routes on a number of different places, the addition of some new off-road multi-use trail, and we'll show you where that's going to go, and some new paved shoulders on provincial roadways. And so this responds directly to your Highway 141 question, so we'll get there. And then some of it's just going to remain unchanged. So, you know, the paved shoulders on Highway 518, we're not going to touch. The Park Trail, pretty much from Orville to the east, we're not going to touch. And the walking and hiking trail in Humphrey, we're not going to worry about improving at this point. So these are the proposed facilities, and I know this is probably tough to see, which is why we've actually uploaded all of this information to the Let's Connect Seguin website. So you can actually see all of the different items that we're recommending on the Let's Connect Seguin website. But I'm just going to quickly run through some of the highlights on this. So the highlights, as I've mentioned, are Osler Park Drive, really looking at upgrading those paved shoulders. We're looking at Rankin Lake Road, and we'd be looking to take the Park Trail from Rose Point all the way to Orville up to a multi-use facility. So crushed limestone, a little bit harder, a little bit smoother surface that's more accessible for people cycling, for people using wheelchairs, for people using mobility devices, etc. We are looking at some additional new trails. This one south from 518. This one that would connect from Badger Road over to the Tim Hortons and that kind of little area there. We'd be looking at some paved shoulders on streets like on roads like Horseshoe Lake, Blue Lake Road, James Bay Junction Road, and Hunter Drive here. And then we would be looking at, you know, kind of the big one is the potential of paved shoulders on Tally Ho Swords Road. So those are kind of the, that's kind of the network in a, the network in a nutshell, I guess. I'll zoom in on some of the settlement areas. So when you see these purple dashed lines on 141, so the paved shoulder on 141 is actually not a paved shoulder at the moment. So the provincial cycling network does include Highway 141 for paved shoulders with reconstruction. So when that roadway gets redone, the province will be adding paved shoulders to it. And we've had that confirmed through emails from MTO to the township throughout this project. We would also be looking, and this is not on the provincial cycling network, but we are looking to add paved shoulders on Highway 632 heading into Rosso, because we do recognize that that's an important connection to take folks south out of Rosso. So that would be what we're looking at. So hopefully that answers your question there, Peter, in terms of what's planned for the town of Rosso. The other piece that we are proposing in the town of Rosso would be a pedestrian crossing. We'd look that, you know, once the province is starting to think about how they're going to be doing Highway 141, looking at a crossing at Cardwell. We have recommended a crossing enhancement within the town of within the village of Rosso to provide that connectivity over across the 141. So I'm just going to quickly burn through these because I think you know, these have a pretty limited application within the township. So, you know, bike lanes would be the kind of thing that would be applied on Rankin Lake Road and pretty much only Rankin Lake Road. There's not really anywhere else that a bike lane per se makes sense within the township. The rest of the infrastructure that we're going to be proposing would be paved shoulders, just because of the rural nature of the community. So the difference between bike lanes and paved shoulders is that paved shoulders, cars are permitted to pull over and stop. They're not no stopping zones, whereas a bike lane would be a no stopping or standing zone. And you'd have to change your parking bylaws to accommodate that. Although on Rankin Lake Road, as it exists right now, there is no stopping or no standing, no stopping anyways. So it wouldn't be an operational change there. One of the other pieces that we are kind of, floating for Rankin Lake Road in the interim would be the idea of an advisory bike lane. This is kind of a newer treatment for these kinds of roads where they're a little bit narrower. There's not necessarily enough space for a traditional bike lane. And there's also not a heavy amount of traffic. So what this would be is that you would have kind of a wider center lane. And then bike lanes on either side of the bike lanes are dashed, and it's the center lane is kind of a shared lane for cars. But then when there's an oncoming vehicle, they are to move over into the bike lane, but still yield to people on bikes in the bike lane. So it's a newer condition within Ontario, and it's definitely it's something that would be interesting to see how it worked on Rankin Lake Road for sure. So those are the kinds of facilities. So I'll again, I'm not going to go through this whole slide. There's a lot on there, but it will be posted on the project website for you to read and understand. The buffered paved shoulders. So this is what we would be proposing on Osler Park Drive and Lake Joseph Road. We'd be looking at just enhancing those paved shoulders to provide a higher level of separation, and also to provide just kind of that visual narrowing of the right of way to reduce traffic speeds. I think we all know that the traffic speeds on Osler Park Drive are quite high because the roadway is so wide and the volumes are relatively low. So we'd want to try and look at how we can start to reduce speeds on that corridor and make it a little bit more of an active transportation destination. Given that the Highway 400 runs directly parallel to it, I think that there's a really great opportunity to take that corridor and make it kind of the active transportation highway through the township of Seguin up into Parry Sound, and south down into the township of Muskoka Lakes. Into the township of Georgian Bay. So that would kind of be the buffered paved shoulders condition. So the priority projects, as we're identifying, the first one that we are recommending is to fill the gap in the trail between James Bay Junction Road and Highway 400. So really get that section between where the Rose Point Recreational Trail ends and the Seguin Trail goes over the 400 on that beautiful overpass, get that up to a standard that meets the needs of all users. That gap right now is a fairly significant barrier, and it really does separate two fantastic facilities. So get that gap closed, and that's a very important one to do. Improve those paved shoulders on Osler Park Road and Lake Joseph Road. Get the resurfacing and refurbishment of both the Seguin and Rose Point trails. So that's from Rose Point all the way out to Orville. And then add paved shoulders on Hunter Drive to connect the highway. See, I did it in the text of the presentation. This is the Alberta coming out of me, to connect Highway 518 to Osler Park Drive. And then where road work has already been scheduled or identified in the capital project, identify and align those proposed upgrades with the roadway construction. So I'm seeing a question come in, and I will take it, and we'll take a moment here. So Ron, I hope that we answered your question on that paved shoulder. Just the main thing is that 141 does not have paved shoulders, and it will have wider paved shoulders. A paved shoulder in Ontario, the desired is 1.5 meters. The minimum is 1.2. And so we're always looking to go to that 1.5 or higher, especially on higher speed and higher volume roads. So the 141 would probably be one where we'd want to look to the province to try and do 1.8 meter paved shoulders if possible. And I'm seeing a question from Councillor Moffat. He's asking if Rankin Lake Road is under number 1. Rankin Lake Road is not a top priority, and the reason is that it is coming up for reconstruction in a number of years, and that would be when we would recommend that gets upgraded to its ultimate facility type. So we would propose traffic calming on that corridor. So whether that is looking at those advisory bike lanes or potentially looking at, you know, you can do center line bollards or other traffic calming devices to try and reduce the vehicle speeds on that corridor. But you would really want to wait until that capital construction comes up to do the ultimate design and really get it up to a level that you're going to be feeling good on that. So I'm seeing the question here. The two bike lane options we presented is planned and most likely for Rankin Lake Road. The ultimate solution for that road is to do full width bike lanes. So that's the, you know, that's the, what we're looking at would be the addition of 1.5 meter bike lanes on either side of the road, and then the road width. I'm seeing a question here from Mayor McDermott. Do we have any idea when the province will be upgrading 141? I don't think we have a specific timeline from the province on that. Tom, anything?
Not yet. Sorry. I was looking at the website earlier today about that, and there's no definitive, but it is on the list. So that is promising.
Okay. And I see a comment here, Tom, that 518 is being done now. Fowler confirmed the paved shoulder is 0.5 meters. Can we comment on that gap? I was under the impression that the paved shoulders were going to be the standard width, but I was not privy to those conversations.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that it is larger than half meter. I think it might be 1 meter. I'm just digging back in my memory right now what that conversation was, but I'm pretty confident both sides will be 1 meter and larger in some areas. You know, inside corners, stuff like that. So I'm pretty confident it's 1 meter.
Okay. So there's a question here, how do bike lanes mix with ATV use? It depends on the municipality. It depends on what the municipal bylaws are as it relates to ATV use on roadways. So you know, it would be really up to the I think, yeah, well, it's province, and then I think it's both, but I could be wrong on that. I'm not an expert on ATV policy. So I will, yeah, I'll leave it to. It seems like folks in the chat have more knowledge on the policy than I do. I would recommend that, you know, on the facility that we're talking about here, when it comes to like Rankin Lake Road, you know, it's a relatively short stretch, and those are going to be the only bike lanes that are going to be recommended as part of this plan. The rest are going to be paved shoulders, and you know, that's really where I think where ATVs and active transportation users have do have a very much a shared desire to see those kinds of things, to have those paved shoulders in place to provide that safe operating space. But I think on bike lanes, so there's okay, that's perfect. So it says that ATVs must drive on the shoulder unless it's too dangerous. So now that they're paved, that's where they will go. I'm not sure. Dave, have you encountered any discussions around ATVs and bike lanes? Would that be a? I assume that because it's a motorized. I guess that would maybe be a bylaw piece. I don't think a bike lane would be quite wide enough for an ATV.
Justin, it's Abram here. I don't think Dave is on, but maybe a suggestion is that we can follow up
Yeah.
So we have note of this comment, and we can be sure to follow up. And Dominique, you can circulate and make sure that whoever asked the question, just see the chat here. Rob, we can make sure that the correct answer is posted, maybe just to kind of follow up there.
Yeah. So we'll get some information on that. Yeah, I suspect it's wide enough for a single, but if you're looking at like a 1.5 meter bike lane, I suspect that the side by sides might not fit on that. Anyways, we'll get that figured out, and we'll canvass some of our previous clients who have a lot of ATVs as well, and we'll get a response to you. So the provincial on-road cycling network, we just wanted to highlight. Obviously, we've already been talking about this. The Highway 141 is scheduled, so we just had that conversation. Highway 518, the resurfacing with paved shoulders added. And then we are recommending that Highway 632, when resurfaced, gets paved shoulders added. So trying to make sure that we're adding this into the township's policy documents so that they have a way to be able to go to the MTO and to the province and say that it is in a planning document, so that they can move different components of this forward. Thank you for that link in terms of the ATVs, Andrew. Appreciate that. So in terms of the trails hierarchy, Amanda, do you want to speak to these in terms of the different types?
Yes, sure. So the trail hierarchy, the different types that we're looking at include type 1, so a primary trail. And I think Justin's commented that this would be key sections of the Seguin and Rose Point trails. So we're recommending taking a compacted stone dust top treatment to that granular surface that you're used to experiencing, and just providing that more even surface, and it just increases the user types that are comfortable on those trail surfaces. So 3 to 4 meters wide, so still quite a wide, comfortable trail. And then type 2, similar trail width. These are going to be trails that are going to maybe experience a higher slope. They're going to stay as the gravel surface, so a little bit of a rougher surface, definitely more able to take that ATV sort of traffic and wear and tear, a little less maybe comfortable for some of the cyclists and stroller walkers, but still a great trail experience. So looking at sections of the Seguin Trail east of Orville. And then there's the type 3 trail, which is more of a woodland sensitive area trail, and here's where we're going to see compacted mulch or a compact dirt surface, so your more rustic trail experience, more reactive maintenance measures, and narrower cross section, and definitely more for the wilderness hiking experience.
So to give you a sense, basically, when it comes to what you'll see, hopefully as this moves forward, is the the primary trail is going to be essentially the same trail that you're seeing now through most of Seguin, all the way from Rose Point out to Orville, just with a little bit smoother surface, a little bit less kind of variation in the slope and grade, and a little bit more of the maintenance to keep it kind of smooth and accessible. And then the secondary trail, that would be kind of like once you get to Orville and continue heading east, and it would look much the same as it does right now. So the trail amenities, Amanda, you want to chat about these ones too?
Yeah, sure. So trail amenities are really important to create a more comfortable and accessible experience, and sort of attract more trail users, and sort of formalize trailheads and other aspects of the trail. So some of these elements we're going to consider include rest areas, so even sheltered areas, and seating, more formal seating, more informal seating, sometimes just a rock will do. Lighting, whether that's sections or just lighting refuge locations, bulletin boards, so network maps, posting information, that idea exchange. Bike repair stations, short-term bike parking units, and oh my gosh, bathrooms. Sometimes at key locations, it can be a real benefit, especially when you're looking at attracting tourism.
Absolutely.
Okay,
All
so I'm
right.
just gonna keep going.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think if we have any questions or anything, you can pop them in. I'm monitoring the chat now that I'm not talking, so I'll be able to pop in there. Go ahead, Amanda.
Wonderful. So addressing problem areas. So we have some recommendations for addressing some of your problem areas. Today, I'm just going to give you an overview of some of those items. And the overall goal is to address those infrastructure and facility design issues to improve conditions for trail users and decrease maintenance and liability concerns. Excuse me. Steep slopes. So under AODA standards, a recreational trail can exceed 5%, providing that there's measures taken to inform users and mitigate barriers to use. So some of those key mitigation actions can include managing erosion, quantifying the challenge in wayfinding signage, and providing additional rest areas. So those approaches, where possible, meandering the trail to decrease slope, and then also reduce erosion. Not always possible. So in those areas where we can't make the trail a little bit flatter, adding rest areas such as informal seating rocks or even flattened trail sections mid-slope can really allow people to use the trail, removing those barriers to some users who might need a break. I always need a break. On the nearest trailhead signage, including information to quantify that challenge. So slope, difference in elevation, the slope length, the runs of the slope. So really people can assess the challenge that they're about to face. Ensure that there's a good cross slope, and we really want to mitigate ruts. So considering culverts, water bars, rolling grade dip style, slope grading, and other measures to try to keep that surface as even and smooth as possible on those steep slope conditions where it tends to be an issue.
And the good news is there's not a lot of these because it is an old rail bed that we're looking at, but there are a couple spots. You know, this picture on the left here is from just by James Bay Junction Road, right where the Rose Point Trail ends, and that's what that, you know, it's quite a steep little section. So, but it is a little section. It's not a very long section. So the good news is that there's not a lot of those big elevation changes.
And then there's, obscure points of entry. So entry points of the trail should be a priority for higher quality facilities and spending. So these are the areas that play a marketing and wayfinding role in your trail system. Locations of a path need to be clearly defined with visible signage, considerations for even large visible markers or gateway features to draw users towards those entries that are sometimes hidden. Similarly, wayfinding throughout public spaces and road corridors should be supported by highly visible infrastructure, so we can really see where those trails are. So delineating the trail surfacing, really clearly separating from the road and parking facilities, so the user doesn't feel like they're just searching. And installing highly visible signage, placemaking markers, as I've mentioned, and then installing trailhead amenities, as we've talked about, to create more of a purposeful sense of place.
Sorry.
So places where there's no trail infrastructure, you know, that's a challenge. So several sections of the trail transitions users onto roadways to supplement gaps in the off-road system. So obviously constraints with land ownership, drainage ditches, slopes, and parking leads to these undesirable conditions where sometimes we abandon users. So some key actions, obviously looking at land acquisition, and user agreements to try to route trail off-road, improving those on-road conditions, so strong wayfinding signage and delineating and separating trail facilities in some way so people feel like they are still on a trail. So strong wayfinding, and whenever we have those breaks, and delineating the trail in some visual way, a grade separation and physical barriers, and obviously seeking off-road land acquisition so we can get users who want that off-road experience to stay on road throughout their journey. So surface quality, always a key concern. So we want to elevate granular trails to the proposed type 1 trail. The existing granular base can be topped up with an aggregate screening and compacted. So a really quick, easy win to get the trails into a higher level of condition and remove some of those barriers to use. Base material is critical, and earthen surfaces should be upgraded with compacted granulars for both the type 1 and 2 trails. Specific trail sections with frequent erosion, seasonal wet conditions, and those with heavy use that cause ruts, it should be reinforced with some sort of structural grid system. So topping up the trail surfacing, replacing earthen trails with more thicker granular bases to give them that reinforcement, and also looking at reinforcing grid surfaces for those major problem areas. And then there's the low-lying wet areas. So this is where the fish are probably swimming across the trail. So for these more serious seasonal and rain event flooding, so approaching with stabilization or elevating the trail surface. So reinforcing the trail with a structural grid system that can provide that stable surface. So something like an eco-raster product or a geogrid that provides a stable surface no matter what the conditions are. And also focusing on elevating the trail to permit movement of water through frequent or group culverts. Excuse me. Sometimes you have a lot of water, like the second picture there. And, you know, there is a consideration for smaller pedestrian bridges, should be another consideration. They do mitigate some of the maintenance and structural issues that we have with boardwalk trails because they're a little more of a robust system. They can allow that ATV traffic over them, but they are obviously a higher capital investment. So that's more of a last resource, but there are a few other mechanisms that we're going to recommend and provide details for to facilitate making sure that you can cross the trail and you're not going to get wet. And then back to you, Justin. I don't know if we have any questions or any other comments that you had on some of those.
Yeah, so just noticing, you know, there's been a couple comments in the chat, the position markers put on Google Maps for trail access points, etc. So I just posted a link in the chat to the Let's Connect Seguin website. So that's the engagement platform that is that's available, and we've got all of our mapping tools are uploaded there, so you can see what is existing, what's proposed, and you can also place pins on the map. So if you're looking to provide information about where you think trail marker access should be, you can plop that on, which is good. And then I'm seeing not interactive on Google Maps for real-time users. Oh, okay, I'm seeing. So you're referring more to, Andrew, you're referring more to like a map that people could pull up and use as they're kind of going through the township. So they'd be able to use it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and that's something that we're starting to recommend in all of our master plans, having that interactive website platform. It's something that you need to build over time, but it can be a really great tool to leverage for sharing information and sharing information about current conditions of some of the trail systems.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's great feedback. And you know, the township is really fortunate to have a wonderful GIS tech who is on the call today, Chris Mahan, who has done some excellent work with the Perry Sound Area Active Transportation Group to develop some mapping and online apps and stuff. So they can request to add information to Google Maps when they have locations, and that's Chris Mahan. He's already on it. Of course he is. So you've got a really great resource there in the fact that you have someone who really knows that stuff inside and out. So make sure you reach out to Chris about those kinds of things after this, and it will definitely be a recommendation out of this project. So I'm going to try and move through the programming recommendations relatively quickly. But I am just going to respond to this question. It seems that ATVs are particularly hard on trail surfaces. Is there any precedent for licensing ATVs to provide maintenance funding? And the answer to that is a simple yes. You know, the park-to-park trail requires ATV users to have membership tags to be on the trail. So there is that existing precedent along the trail, even within Seguin Township. So Abram, yeah, if you want to pop that in the question and answer, that would be great. So short answer, yes, is where we're at. So I'm going to just kind of blaze through these really quickly because I do want to be cognizant of our time. Oh, I'm seeing not true from Andrew about the tags. I don't know if that's. Thought it was. I thought the Park to Park Trail required tags to be on it, but maybe I'm getting incorrect information. Yeah, some trails, but I think the Park to Park is one of them. Yes. So I want to rock through here. So the programming, just want to identify that we had some, we did review best practices from a number of different areas. So we looked at plans that we've developed in Durham region, Uxbridge, Prince Edward County, Whitewater region, and then looked at a programming guide from the Toronto Centre for Active Transportation. And so we were looking at a number of different things that we wanted to get to. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the programming that we're recommending for the township to help to build a stronger culture of active transportation. So number one and number two are a wayfinding system. So as we've we kind of mentioned that the township is pretty big, and so we really do want to focus on how we can connect people to and from the different destinations. So the wayfinding system would build on the existing Park to Park Trail maps, but then also provide things like cycling and walking distance and times, more mapping, more wayfinding signage, more pavement markings at those key destinations, and then looking at those AODA requirements. So for example, identifying elevation changes, rest areas, surfacing types, all those kinds of things. A joint municipal advisory committee, this would be looking at how you can integrate, particularly with the community of Parry Sound, as they move forward with their own active transportation infrastructure, and knowing that a lot of the amenities that the residents of Seguin Township rely on are located within Parry Sound. Looking at how you can connect between the municipal advisory committee and the work that's being done on both the trails and the on-road facilities. So that would be a piece that we would recommend. Looking at some safety and promotional campaigns. So in particular, 1 meter safe passing law campaigns. Those are focused specifically on highlighting to the fact that the 1 meter safe passing law came into effect in Ontario in 2018, and looking at how that can be educated on and enforced. Potentially hiring a staff person, maybe on a summer part-time position, a summer student, who can help to do some of these elements that are maybe a little bit outside the purview of folks like Dominique and Tom. So for example, identifying some of the rest areas, identifying some of the stops, and going in and doing some of that mapping work. For example, those would be a good thing for that staff person to do, as well as leading informative walks or rides through the township, and definitely liaising with the new program that's going on in terms of cycling education for youth that's happening with the school board. Looking at bike and trail hubs at key locations. So getting having those, as we were talking about, those things like benches, shelters, bike repair stands, maps, washrooms, lighting, having those kind of like trail hubs at key locations throughout the township. Those are a really great way to visibly show support for active transportation and trails. Looking at an annual community cycling challenge, so kind of creating a little bit of a community event around it, whether it can be a charity ride, school-based commuting challenges, so kind of challenges between the schools to see who can log the most trips, or even active commuting challenges within workplaces. Looking at bike equipment giveaways, this can be a good educational event as well, highlighting the fact that it's the law in Ontario for people to have bike lights and bells on their bike. Those are they're legally required in the province, so we want to make sure that folks understand that. But then you can also do basic giveaways like maps, water bottles, reflectors, those kinds of things, just to do them as an informational piece as well. And then you want to look at starting to do a monitoring and reporting scheme. So, reporting back every year on the progress that's being made on implementing this project, and also looking at how you are evaluating the usership and the ridership that's changing along those corridors. So, installing some trail counters at key destinations along the Park Trail, and tracking use over time and seeing how it changes as the infrastructure is upgraded and changed. Looking at some community trail outings, so doing things like community bike rides and hikes. Those are really great ways to kind of just add active transportation into the different things. So doing some community bike rides or trail hikes can be a lot of fun, and a great way to connect with what's already popular within the community. And then looking at the potential of setting up an e-bike rental or loan service, maybe through the library or through a local community center. One of the things that I'm a major evangelist for e-bikes. I think that until you've put foot to pedal on a modern e-bike, I don't think you can truly understand the way that they can completely change how you view cycling and active transportation. So looking at those as an opportunity to introduce people to cycle touring through the area that allows them to cover some of the bigger distances that exist within the township without really having to break a sweat. So those are the programming pieces that I wanted to highlight. So I do see a question in the chat. One of them is, why can't we tap into volunteers for wayfinding and leading trail walks? My advice to a community is always that you find its values in its budget. And for something like this, where you'd be looking at a relatively small investment in terms of staff time, the amount of consistency and continuity that you would have on those events would be much higher, and it would be much more reliable than relying on volunteers. I've led some volunteer rides in my own community, and I can tell you that were it not for the fact that I'm definitely a completionist on stuff, but there are some nights where I just do not feel like going out and leading the ride that I planned. Whether my kids are whining and tired and they don't want to come with me, or supper just took longer to get on the table than I thought. Volunteers are amazing, but having someone whose job it is to make sure that those pieces move forward ensures that those volunteers feel supported and that you don't burn them out. And that's one of the most important things that you need to consider as you move forward with these types of projects. So I'm going to continue to move on. I'm going to try and get through the project phasing really quickly. And I hear you. Thank you. You can hire me. There we go. So you've got your first applicant to the active transportation coordinator position there, Dominique. So I'm going to go through the phasing here, and we'll just quickly go through this. In terms of the phasing horizons, we've identified it as short-term, medium-term, and long-term. The short-term is kind of the 1 to 5 year. Again, this is mostly like quick wins, easily implementable, low cost, or that's on the township's capital projects. Medium-term, they have a little bit higher costs, but they would be best paired with capital projects. They're coming up. And then long-term, those are going to be a little bit more expensive, a little bit more time constraining. So we are looking at the majority of our kilometers for new infrastructure are going to be in the short-term phasing. And the reason why you see this number kind of quite a bit higher than the rest is that the signed routes are very easy to implement. Those are just signs on the road. but then also the improving existing facilities and moving to these buffered paved shoulders. Those are both relatively low cost, relatively high impact projects. So improving the park to park trail and doing some buffered paved shoulders on Oser Park and Lake Joseph Road. So the timelines here, as we've identified them, would be really focusing on the short term on getting from Rose Point to the gas station here at the Highway 400 crossing, getting that entire trail section up to a multi-use standard. Looking at getting the paved shoulders done on Blue Lake Road as that gets reconstructed, Rankin Lake Road with the bike lanes, Black Road, this would be all signed routes, and then paved shoulders here on Horseshoe Valley or Horseshoe Lake Road. I can never remember. Anyways, Horseshoe Road. We'll just call it Horseshoe Road today because it's almost 8:30 and I'm tired. And then Clear Lake Road would be just signed routes. And then looking at the 6 to 10, so some of these, again, bigger capital investments. So, you know, maybe a paved shoulder here on James Bay Junction Road, getting the paved shoulders done on Tally Ho Swords Road, again, with reconstruction, upgrading the trail from the crossing all the way to Orville. And then the longer term projects would be some of these other pieces, you know, looking at like potentially 612, looking at this trail connection here and this southern section of that trail from the 518 heading down. So these will all, we'll post all of these, we'll post the PDFs of these maps so you can see a high quality PDF of it so you can gain a better understanding of what we're proposing. But, you know, this is just within the settlement areas just to highlight. So yeah, like Rankin Lake Road would, you know, I think Tom, you had identified that as potentially on like on the high end of the 1 to 5, like that might be a 5-year project, but it's in there because we identified it as a relatively high impact project. Of course, the trails, and then, you know, looking at the other communities, these ones are outside of our control in terms of when those will get done, but we're optimistic that they'll get done, hopefully in the not too distant future. I'm not going to really talk about this slide other than to just say that, you know, the way that we have been constructing this project is really based on best practice in the province of Ontario in terms of looking at this. So we're in the strategic planning here. Once you're done that, then you get on into feasibility and functional design, get into the detailed design, construction, and then celebrate that launch and start collecting data. So, you know, we're over here in phase 1, but it can move pretty quickly over to phase 5, especially with some of these relatively simple projects that don't necessarily have a high degree of planning necessary for them. So when it comes to funding all of the pieces for this project, you know, we're looking at internal and external funding sources, trying to identify different ways that the township can fund improvements. So obviously the existing capital budget from the township's traffic, transportation, and recreational services departments, you know, taking allocations from that to increase the funding for the trails and active transportation. And then new development charges can also be levied, especially because a lot of these are, you know, can be tied to growth as they move forward. External funding would be funding from the federal government. They have a recently announced active transportation strategy, looking at partnering with adjacent municipalities to upgrade and improve facilities that are going to bring additional tourism into the area. And then looking at some of the provincial government's grants like the Trillium Fund, Green Infrastructure Fund, and potential future funding sources as well. Always keeping your eye on those funding streams as they open. So the next steps, and it looks like I'm going to finish on time, which, to be honest, is a miracle. I'm really surprised we're going to get her done, but here we are. So, you know, we've got the proposed network and the proposed programming. We'd love to get your feedback on that. And you know, one of the things that we really want to do is we want to encourage folks to use the township's new engagement platform. So the engagement platform that the township is using is a program called Bang the Table or Engagement HQ. It's a really great way to provide your feedback. It allows you to connect with different projects that the township is doing. It gives you an opportunity to learn what's going on. If you kind of register and sign up, you get updates when relevant engagements and projects are posted there. And that's where we're going to be looking for your feedback on both the mapping. So if you want to provide us information on what's going on there, on the elements that you think are good, that you think should be a priority, on the elements that you think, you know, what are you guys thinking here? This is completely off the wall and we don't want to see that. Or if there's just pieces you want us to know about, you know, if there's a blind corner that we didn't consider, if there's a really steep slope that maybe you want to highlight, those are the kinds of things that we want to know on that map. And yes, we will have the open house video posted for review, and we will post all the slides. So we've got the programming opportunities up there, which will provide you an opportunity to take a look and see and tell us which one of those programming elements you think are really high priority versus which ones you think are a lower priority. That'll allow us to kind of categorize them according to the value that they're going to provide to the community. And then we're going to get moving with our consolidating feedback, posting our discussion papers, which are kind of the chapters of the final plan for feedbacks. We'll post them onto the project website and provide an opportunity for comment. We'll get our costing and prioritization finalized, and then we're going to develop the final plan and present it to council before the end of the year. Whew, 8:29. And I am at the point where I get to thank you all for the generosity that you've brought with your time, with your feedback, with your information that you provided to us. Thank you, Jason, for that comment. We really appreciate it. We've been really enjoying this project. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with township staff. And a real pleasure to hear from the folks who live in Seguin about this. We can tell that there's a lot of excitement, and we're pretty excited to bring it forward. So if there's any other questions or comments, we'll stay here until you're good. But other than that, we really appreciate you guys being here, and it's been wonderful.
I just want to say thank you to you, Justin, and your team. That was a great presentation, as you can see by all the comments. I encourage everybody to go to our engagement platform, Let's Connect Seguin, and leave your comments there. Have a look at everything that's posted. It's a great site. So thanks again to all of you.
There is a really good question, and we'll post a response to that, Andrew. We didn't address snowmobiling, and the reason is because all of the trails that we're recommending as 3-season. So we're not recommending any operational changes to snowmobile trails. It was that was the main thing. When we looked at it, we just determined that yes, they do share the same trails, and that's why we're looking at them being all the trails that we're looking at as 3-season trails. For like active mobility. So once the snow hits, the rules would be the same for the snowmobile trails as they currently are. It wouldn't affect the operation of those at all. Hopefully that helps. All right, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to stop recording. And